there's a lot of enthusiasm about simulation scenarios, like are we in a simulation? And there's a kind of, okay, you look as if you're not enthusiastic. Although a good example, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't dismiss this too casually, because the kind of person you might be able to get funding from is like Elon Musk, you know, the guy who makes Tesla cars, and he's a big proponent of the simulation. He thinks the chances are overwhelming that we are not in, quote, base reality. Anyway, here's my question. In these simulation scenarios, if we are a simulation, if our universe is a simulation, it seems still possible that we could get to a point where we could produce a simulation as complicated as this universe. And that is kind of a similar, in many ways dissimilar, but it is a scenario where universes in some sense replicate themselves. Okay, technically they're simulated, but you don't know the difference from the inside. So you don't resonate to this idea?
I really seriously do not. It sounds solipsistic. You know what Schopenhauer said about solipsism?
I don't.
Okay, he said solipsism is like a fortress in a war, which cannot be assaulted frontally, but can be safely bypassed and ignored.
Okay, of course, the simulation enthusiasts would say, no, solipsism is assuming this is all real. How centered of you, so to speak. But, okay, second question,
okay.
Final
Let me
question.
give you some advice.
Yeah.
If it really is a simulation, and you notice some little glitch where you've caught the computer programmer, pretend you don't know and don't say anything, because he's going to rewrite it and he's going to write you out of it, okay? And it'll just be like you never existed.
No, I would have been very valuable to him if I'm spotting bugs. He'll give me a raise. So
he might put you in a subroutine and turn you into a demon. I don't know.
I think he would replicate me a million times over. I'd be delighted. But final question. So there are all these. It looks increasingly like there are actually a lot of planets out there that are conducive to the evolution of life. In your theory, there's reason to think that actually life probably becomes pretty good at evolving over time, and has done that by the time our universe showed up. So the question now, presumably, on many of these planets, things moved along a little faster, so they're like ahead of us technologically, in some cases way ahead of us technologically. So, and maybe you've heard this question, why have we not been contacted by some of these civilizations?
Okay. First place, it's quite possible that when you look at all the improbables, not just to create bacteria, but to actually come out the other side with intelligent life, it's like something on the order of 1 to a galaxy. So the others would be billions of light years away and we wouldn't see them. Okay. But I actually, in my paper, my joint paper with my student, I proposed something we called gravicetti, which is that if somebody is making these black hole starships, they would be emitting gravitational radiation at a very, very high frequency, which no natural process would do, because they're tiny, and yet they're very violent. So we could build, instead of building, you see, gravitational wave detectors have to be fine-tuned for looking for a particular frequency. So they've been building very long ones because they're looking for things from collapsing stars and so on. But this could be much shorter if it was looking for a much higher frequency, and you could then scan for it and you could see it. So it could be that if there are some of these things, we could find them. So we could discover, using gravitational means, if this is correct, we could discover if there are advanced civilizations otherwise in the universe. And other than that, we wouldn't be very likely to see them, except in the very wise alien scenario. The very wise alien scenario is that they're bopping
That was going to be my next question, by the way.
Okay.
Proceed.
Bopping along in the universe, and then they see us. They get a good look at us, and they turn and go the other way as fast as they can. And then we would see the gamma rays, the collimated gamma rays from their jet as they departed the premise.
Or they just observe us from a distance. They don't want to interfere. Or maybe like interfere just occasionally, like to get you funding, but not aside from that. Something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't. At the moment, what I'm doing doesn't need funding. I mean, this would, and I could, if other things had gravitated to it, I could have done it perfectly well without funding. It's math. It's the things I can think. The other things that you could do if you really wanted to try to pursue this would be to try to develop different kinds of gamma ray lasers, to try to produce gamma ray lasers that would focus. And you might eventually try to produce gamma ray lasers that were powerful enough that you could start to see the nonlinearity of the vacuum. So that's something.
Well, would that help you build a black hole or something?
Well, yeah, just make a billion of them and figure out how to collimate them all, and you've got it.
Okay.
It's just
what do you do with it? Huh? What do you do with the rest of your life though? Once you've accomplished that, it's like the girl who sailed around the world.
Well, I'm not really worried about what do I do with the rest of my life. I'm actually rather old, and I had a heart attack 3 years ago. I don't know about the rest of
well, then in that case, then I think you should stick with developing the unified field theory.
No, but the thing is, building one or two of these and trying to push it up to the point where you have gamma ray lasers. The other thing you could be working on is trying to find ways to store. There was a small discussion about my proposal, and people pointed out you would really want to find a way to build nuclear batteries because you have to store up all this energy. And it might be the laser could be used to store it up itself, or you might be some more indirect process where energy gets stored by exciting nuclei, and then they all give off at once and excite the laser. I mean, all right. So people could start to experiment with things like that. Building one might be just a bit beyond our current technology. But the thing is, building 1 billion tons of them and collimating them is the thing that it's just too big of a job for it. I mean, the only thing that's really impossible about building it right now is that it's too big and too expensive. Other than that, it's just a bit beyond what we know how to do. You would like to increase the power of your gamma ray. I mean, the other problem is that gamma ray lasers are classified because they can be used to shoot down ICBMs. So I don't know what's known about gamma ray lasers.
You don't have that kind of classification access. No. Neither do I. So, well, listen. I think
I promise you the military doesn't give a good goddamn about what I'm doing.
I got to admit, it's kind of hard to imagine you like walking around the Pentagon. And but you never know, put a coat and tie on, try it.
There was a 100-year Starship thing. I submitted a proposal, but I said mine is going to take 500 years, so they didn't. It was very funny. Yeah,
people have such short time horizons.
I know.
I'm telling you, Elon Musk is your man.
Well, I don't need any money.
Quit bad-mouthing the simulation scenario. You want to stay in his good graces. He's a visionary. No. He's a visionary billionaire. That's what you don't need. You don't need money. So you're fine. Well, listen, this has been great. You've given us plenty to think about. We will link to your papers about this, and for that matter, any other papers you want us to link to. Is there anything else you want to advertise? Like, do you have a Twitter feed or any...
No, I'm not.
You're not like that?
No, I'm just very quietly trying to explore a different avenue toward the unified field theory than what the rest of the community is doing.
Okay.
And not telling people about it very much, and just I'm often in this long. I'm in phased retirement, and I'm working basically full time on that.
Well, if you're not going to do flagrant self-promotion, I'll do a little. People can subscribe to this, The Wright Show. They can subscribe to the podcast. They can watch the streaming video on Meaning of Life TV or Blogging Heads TV. And if people rate our podcast highly and review it on iTunes, we love it. And listen, I would love to down the road have another conversation with you if you have time. Maybe like figure out this unified field theory thing.
Well, it's very mathematical.
Well, you never know. Maybe I would ask exactly the questions that would make it accessible, and who knows? Maybe I would give you the key insight that you've been lacking. You don't think so? You don't look persuaded.
Well, it's down to a very, very knotty mathematical problem. And that the other physicists wouldn't even be looking at it because they don't do that kind of math. But I don't know. I mean,
I'm in favor of it. Let me just say that I support you in your endeavors.
Okay, well, that's very okay. Well, I'm a professor at Kansas State University. I guess you could give people my email. Well, I don't know. Is that a good? How big
It
is
depends. Do you like emails from cranks?
No.
Your email address, I believe, is on the Kansas State website.
Yeah.
You are at Kansas State. You are a mathematician. People can Google you, and they can Google Meduso anthropic principle, MEDUSO dash anthropic principle, and they will. There's a Wikipedia entry and everything.
Or they can look at my name, or they can look at black hole starships on Google. There's a bunch of back and forth about why it's people saying why it's impossible or why it's possible or whatever. And there was it briefly went what do they call? They don't call it
viral.
Viral. That's the word. Yeah. And in fact, my student told me, "Oh, it's gone viral," like 3 days after we published it.
You didn't know if that was good news or bad news?
Huh?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I didn't care one way or the other much, but I looked, and there was one article in Vietnamese, and there was another one in some language in Central Asia that I couldn't identify. So it went all over the world in a hurry, and then I guess it disappeared. There was even a rabbi saying that my theology was acceptable because it drew on Spinoza. One of my papers is entitled Starships and Spinoza.
Huh. Maybe we'll have a conversation about that down the road. We've had a couple of Spinoza chats on this website.
Right.
So, but listen, thank you so much. This is fascinating. I'm going to get back to keeping the world intact, and I'll let you build the starship.